Make sure. Connecting, 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 connecting. Still connecting.
I know it goes on and on. How are you, Chris?
Who can complain? All right, we're live. My old friend Vicky Ward and I are on right now. I'm very grateful to Vicky for doing this, and I'm very happy to see how her project with James Patterson and the Substack investigations and the perspective she can provide. I'm glad that it is all growing robustly. Success well deserved, my friend, and thank you for being here with me to talk about Epstein and what is not and what has been learned. Um, I would like to start by saying that I think one of the lessons of the Epstein affair is these pod bros and all these digital denizens who were telling you don't listen to the Vicky Wards, don't listen to real journalists, don't listen to real media outlets, only listen to us. And they have been hiding things from you, and we will expose them, like we'll expose that the COVID vaccine has nanotechnology in it to track you, and that Epstein was a cover up. And that all the rich were involved, and we're going to blow it all open, and Trump's going to do it for us. They were playing with conspiracy theories and they were doing it for profit. And now you know that. And they're backpedaling and they're trying to pick bad guys and they're trying to explain why they were sitting at the White House with empty binders, pretending they got information for you and that they were special. And they all went in with Trump. And then Trump, wound up not doing what they wanted. And now they're scrambling. And there's a lesson in that when you invest in conspiracies, it can be profitable, but it rarely pays off with truth. And that's where we are now. That said, do I believe there are things to learn about who was around Epstein and what was done and what wasn't done that you don't know? 100%. Will you?
Yeah.
Vicky, what's your take?
Well, so much to unpack in that, Chris.
You can go anywhere you want. You don't have to follow anything I said.
Yeah, no. So look, yes, are there questions about Jeffrey Epstein that we do not have the answers to? 100%. Beginning with the men, which is the thing that I've sort of been banging the drum about. When Virginia Roberts joined the victims' class action suit in late 2014, 2015, she came out and mentioned other men that she claimed Jeffrey Epstein had pimped her out to, with the exception of Alan Dershowitz, who fought her on that successfully and won. Those names sort of vanished from sight. We know, because Alan has been on record with me, that Jeffrey Epstein at that time asked Alan if he could pay Alan's legal bills to make Virginia Roberts go away, effectively pay hush money. Alan was like, no, she's accused me publicly. I'm going to defend myself. That's my right. But he knows of instances where Jeffrey Epstein successfully paid hush money. There are other instances. It's also, I think, fair to say, Chris, that, I have long reported that without Jeffrey Epstein's money, there would have been no sex crimes. There's no evidence of him abusing or trafficking minors in the 1980s. It's only when he gets to the 1990s and he is basically fenced himself in his island and in his his mansions and his isolated ranch, that he's then able to set up, this horrific web around him. The 2000 indictment of him talked about a conspiracy. You can't have a conspiracy if it's just you. And it's hard to think that it was just him and Ghislaine Maxwell, the only person who has paid a price for this. So are there other names that we, the public, ought to know? I think probably yes. That is all separate, however, from the way that the sort of MAGA right has handled this, to your point. What was Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, doing when she went on record talking about Jeffrey Epstein's client list being on her desk, because it's a very long way from saying that to then saying, well, actually, there's nothing in the files. So, I mean, in that sense, I think you're 100% right to say that this is a case of being hoist by your own petard. I've not understood, I will say this, why the president on this particular issue just doesn't actually come clean, because this might be a rare instance of where actually he's really on the right side of things. I mean, as far as I know, he told his first political campaign advisor, Sam Nunberg, in 2014, when Virginia Roberts came forward, that he and Jeffrey Epstein had stopped speaking because Jeffrey Epstein was harassing the daughter of a member of Mar-a-Lago. You know, if you were President Trump, he's very open about a lot of things. Why not just come out and talk about that?
Well, he has said that. I agree with you on the head scratchy part. I just see it differently. One, I don't believe that the Trump administration has changed posture on disclosure to protect the president. I do not believe that. And the reason I don't believe it is because if there was shit that they could put out about it, Merrick Garland in the past administration would have.
Yeah.
And they didn't,
Oh.
So that part of it, I'm okay with. Why he doesn't, look, I wish he had never courted conspiratorial types to begin with. But that was really important in the formation of MAGA, was getting people who had a perverse sense of purpose and who wanted to burn it all down and wanted to prove the deep state and wanted to disrupt everything. And, that's who he latched on to. And it's come with a price of extremism. They have extreme ideas and extreme wants. And why did Bondi say it's on my desk? Because she misspoke. That's why.
Yes.
And she was believing the bullshit, that this is what we say. There is no client list. There's never been a client list. I believe that. Why? Because Epstein's lawyers would have known about it and they would have brought it out to try to help him. Because Ghislaine Maxwell would know, and she is rotting in prison and miserable and scared out of her head and would say anything to get out. And if she had stuff to offer, it would be there. What I don't get is, why don't they say the truth, which is, there aren't files per se. We can put out whatever you want. Some of it's going to be redacted, so you guys are never going to be satisfied. But these two judges in New York, Berman and this other one, redacted these FBI documents that had the full list of accusations of women who came forward saying that they were victimized by Epstein and others. And the names of the accusers and the names of several of the accused were redacted. Why? Unclear. On the accuser side, it's more clear. It's because they were perceived as victims. Well, what if they were making it up? Like the woman with Alan Dershowitz. Is she still a victim if she made it up to try to get paid off? And it just so happened she picked on the wrong guy with Dershowitz, who could actually prove that her allegation was false, and she kept changing the allegation to try to find a date where she had been in the same place as Dershowitz, and she couldn't. Does that make her a victim? So, well, why are the guys' names redacted? Well, because they were attached to no criminality. Well, how do we know? See, that question can be litigated, and I don't know why the administration doesn't do that litigation and come out and tell people that. It's not that we have the information. We don't have it. It was redacted by these judges, and we're going to.
Well, it's a great question, Chris. I mean, I think you've had Alan Dershowitz on, talking about this, because he knows the names. He's not allowed get into it. It is something that the administration could litigate. Exactly to your point. I mean, I think that one of the frustrating things about the Epstein story is it is a lot more complicated than people want to believe. The story of the victims is very complicated, as we were sort of reminded recently when Virginia Roberts Giuffre, sadly passed away, committed suicide. There are other victims who blamed Virginia Roberts Giuffre for recruiting them. I mean, we heard that in Ghislaine Maxwell's trial, and it was a big reason that she wasn't called as a
Right.
witness, despite the fact that she was the reason that the trial took place in the first place. Virginia Roberts was the reason that Jeffrey Epstein was arrested in 2019, because it was all the discovery in the civil litigation between her and Ghislaine Maxwell that was then then used
Yeah.
by the feds to go after Epstein, and then when he died, to go after Ghislaine Maxwell. I mean, Chris, you're trained. I think you did. You go to law school? I think dimly I remember that you know this stuff inside out. But I certainly got the sense, sitting through Ghislaine Maxwell's trial, that the government brought that case to win it. They don't like to bring cases they don't win, and the scope of it was very, very, very narrow. So, I mean, your point about would Ghislaine have given up things if she could, I don't know if that was ever on the table, because this was all about the underage sex and the grooming, and it was almost tantalizing to sit there, because the names of people who were on the plane or had given plane rides to Epstein, and bankers who may have financed him, they made cameo appearances, but you couldn't put the jigsaw piece of the puzzle. You couldn't put it all together, that it all made sense, and you couldn't.
Not legally. You couldn't do it.
Right.
Couldn't do it in a court of law, but you could do
No.
it podcast all day long. And that's
Right.
what worked so well, is that it allowed people, the Schultz and all the pod. I just call them the pod bros because there's too many of them. They're people who were never relevant on the right, except for Rogan, until Trump gave them. And they like to say, well, they got Trump elected. The fuck they got Trump elected. He got them elected. He got them made relevant. And after him, I think that they're going to be scrambling. And I actually think the left will have this pendular move where it'll all of a sudden be like Bill Barr and all their own will come up. But that's for another day. Um, my point about Ghislaine Maxwell is, yes, it was narrow in scope. Yes, federal prosecutors don't bring cases they can't win. They have a ridiculous success rate. Okay. And there is a ridiculous rate of people who lose that go to prison. So, like we just saw with Eric Adams, you don't fuck with the feds unless it's really wrong what they're doing to you. You cut a deal because they're going to
Right.
get, especially as Damian Williams. So, my point is, and Ghislaine Maxwell is in part represented by Arthur Aidala, famous son of Counselor Arthur Aidala, who is, of course, a legend. And, you can talk to him about this. And even if it's narrow in scope, if you have the ability to hand over victimizers of underage or trafficked kids, you do it and it helps you, especially as the woman that was always a weird fit for accountability in this situation. And she didn't. And now she says she wants to testify before Congress. Yeah, I'm sure she does. I would do anything if I were she to try to get out. But the idea that she's been holding on to information, I find very uncompelling. I really believe that this was about selling the unknown. And look, why did I hear so many times that I was on Epstein's plane? Because of these fake manifest lists. I've known Vicky a very long time, socially, personally, professionally. I don't know that I've ever met Epstein. I know Christina met him through a mutual friend back in the day. I know that she was in his contact list, so I had to deal with bullshit that like my wife was involved. Like, there must be 100,000 people who have her in a contact list, but that's what this story was about. Your brother was on the plane, wasn't he? No. Can you prove he wasn't? What? How do you do that? How do I prove I don't know Jeffrey Epstein? See, that's why it worked for the pod guys. And now that's why the reason Trump is saying fuck off is because he's taken this personally. Wait,
Right.
wait, are you saying that you think I'm dirty? Are you saying that I should be impeached because of this? Are you saying that I did something wrong about Epstein? You don't know what you're talking about. I don't fucking need you. Get away from me. You're as bad as the Democrats. That's what he's saying. Now, I think it's a dicey move for him because even though, Andrew Schultz, Tim Pool, Dave Smith, Joe Rogan, whoever these guys are, um, they aren't going anywhere because they live off outrage. And they don't have even what you have, which is a reputation, where if you are wrong, people are going to say you're wrong, and it's going to
Right.
currency. And if you work, you write in a piece of Vanity Fair, um, you have an editor, you have a fact checker, you have a lawyer, you have a standards and practices person. You don't get to go off half cocked on a podcast and say, well, I don't know that Chris Cuomo never was with Epstein on Epstein's Island. I don't know that. So he could have, I guess. You don't get to say that. They do. So he's got to be careful because they could live off innuendos about him from now until the end of his term.
They certainly, they certainly could, Chris. I mean, what is it? It's really frustrating, the Epstein story, because as an investigative journalist, not as someone who's taking part of conspiracy theories, not someone who's invested in Pam Bondi's misspeaking, which I actually think that's almost the biggest travesty. She's the Attorney General. You if there's a job where you're supposed to be precise with your language, it ought to be that. So I think that she should apologize for misspeaking at the very least, rather than sort of saying, "Oh no, there's nothing further to be said."
Trump does not believe in apologizing, and I used to criticize him for this, but I can't say that he's wrong in the current state of play. In our friendship, I insult you, if I want to stay friends with you, I should apologize. And I should mean it, and I should show you that with how I am the next time it is whatever it is. In politics, in the media, if you apologize, you are a dead man. They will beat over the head with the apology. They always say the same thing. Just apologize. Just admit it. Stop twisting. Stop digging deeper. And then you do it and they kill you. So that's why she hasn't apologized.
Fascinating. I mean, I will tell you, here are the questions that as a journalist, I wish the government would have gone after Epstein's money. I mean, how weird is it that, Leon Black, one of the richest men in America, chose Jeffrey Epstein as his tax advisor and paid him over $160 million rather than going to Sullivan and Cromwell, or, and is a well-known estate planner. It's just weird. How weird is it that Leslie Wexner reportedly financed this guy to hundreds of millions of dollars, and yet after Jeffrey Epstein was dead, said, "Oh, he stole, over $40 million from me." This doesn't compute.
Nope.
None of it makes any sense. And I know, because I knew Jeffrey Epstein, that he used to say to me over 20 years ago, when rich people get defrauded, when people steal from rich people, they don't go to the authorities. It's embarrassing for them. And I have heard of many instances of wealthy people who were conned by Jeffrey Epstein. And so the investigative journalist in me has always wanted to follow the money. And I was deeply frustrated that the government didn't want to follow Epstein's money. But I was told that the reason they did it's too difficult. They're spending taxpayer money after all, and they might not, get anywhere. So you come back to Ghislaine. Why did they go after Ghislaine Maxwell? Because they could.
Mm-hmm.
But it is worth pointing out, Chris, that by the time they arrested Ghislaine Maxwell, compared to the bold-faced names that had been mentioned that we know about, many of whom actually are dead now, she was possibly the least powerful and the least wealthy.
100%.
And there have always been these reports that have come to me about, all these deals that were done by these men, a lot of NDAs, a lot of settlements. And as you know, the government can only really prosecute somebody if they know about a crime. So if a victim isn't going to come forward and go and agree in a courtroom that something appalling happened, well, the government's got a bit of a problem.
Yes, and I think in this case, did those guys want to get involved? No. Is there something uh weird, compromised? Yes. Do I know what it is? No, I do not. Is it knowable? Probably. But with Epstein dead and these other guys now very old and out of the picture, the ability to get it done is very slight. But that's never been, I've never heard one of the pod guys harp on any of the things you're talking about. This was just
No.
a proxy for Pizzagate for them. This was,
Yeah.
let's find out that Bill Clinton was banging a 13-year-old on the island. That's what they wanted, right? And Ghislaine,
Yeah.
well, you said it perfectly. They got her because they could. You know, since when is a woman relevant in a young female sex trafficking ring? You know what I mean? Like come on. That's not what this is about. This is about men, okay? And this was about, the idea that Epstein was the only one who liked the young girls and that you never knew anything. That's about as making as much sense as you partied with Diddy all the time, but you knew nothing about freak offs. You know,
Well, I'll push back a little on that because I think that actually one of the things that really struck me when and I went into that courtroom every day for 6 weeks for the Maxwell trial was how her role was insidious. I mean, there was this older, sophisticated woman and they trusted her. And she was the one that got them in the door to Epstein. And I think then the picture that was created for us in the courtroom at that trial was actually of a very closed world. Jeffrey Epstein, sure, he knew a lot of rich and powerful people, but the scenes that were described for us in that courtroom, it was women coming in and out through the kitchen. It was Virginia Roberts. They would come in through the kitchen entrance and go up to his massage room, and then they would come back down. It wasn't, with the exception of Virginia Roberts, who we know obviously then met Prince Andrew. Um, this wasn't a blending of worlds. In most instances, there was one victim who was flown to New York, but he kept that world
mhm.
and he kept that world fairly tight. So
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, after the fact, I've heard plenty of people say that they always had suspicions. Same thing with Madoff. After the fact, there were plenty of people who told me that they would never invest with him and why they didn't, and it never made sense. You know,
yeah,
hindsight's 2020. But look, it leaves you in the same place. The idea that he had this kind of appetite for all these girls, and there was no other guy in his life that was interested in it, is hard to believe, especially given the fact that, look, I know people who got settlement money from the recovery fund, and it wasn't just about Jeffrey Epstein. So,
right.
is
Well,
there stuff
there's your big answer to
right
yes.
there? Is there more to it? Yeah. Does the Trump administration have the ability to get into it? Limited, but this was a con job by
Well, and at scale. I mean,
everyone.
we also know that the banks, right, Deutsche Bank and J.P. Morgan, wound up paying money. I mean, this was at scale.
Yeah.
Um,
And look, I knew they were going to look, but let's be clear though, for people who, the uninitiated. And by the way, just one of the questions here. This one guy keeps saying Merrick Garland. No, that's a specious suggestion because he had to wait for the case to get through the Supreme Court. No, it's not how it works in politics. Is that how it worked with the Russia investigation? If they have information that they want to get out, they leak it. Okay, the FBI leaks. Everybody leaks. The DOJ leaks. Okay, and they would have leaked information that was bad for Trump connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Okay, it is naive to believe otherwise, and it had nothing to do with Merrick Garland doing it by the rules. That's a bullshit suggestion. So I don't accept that. But um, I do think that in terms of what to do now, I get why people saying Trump's making an unforced error, telling his people to shut up. I don't want you to support me if you're that interested in this. yes, they are conspiracy think people, and he doesn't respect that. He used them, but he doesn't respect them. He is not a conspiracy guy. He just likes to play with it for advantage. I believe that. But one, MAGA's bigger than he is, and he's got to be careful. Two, transparency and wanting to know what the government thinks it can keep from regular people and what it can do to protect some versus others is a real grievance. And it's
Mm.
not way. And the administration fell short on UAPs. It fell short on JFK. And now it fell short on Epstein. And it is sending the signal that they are just like everybody else and that
I'll,
you
t-
weren't
I'll
voting for who you opposed.
I'll tell you one thing that I am very stunned by is that this moment of all the moments, somebody thinks is the right moment to fire Maureen Comey, who was outstanding as the prosecutor in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. So to fire her without cause, suddenly, this career prosecutor who was pivotal in sending Ghislaine Maxwell to jail. I've been talking about her a lot because she was part of the prosecution team against Diddy.
Yeah, that's
But
what I was was the reason that they were embarrassed by that case and the outcome in the case. I also don't know, as a matter of fact, that she was fired. Maybe you do.
well, she sent out a memo, a letter to her colleagues, right? I mean, it strongly suggests. I mean, I read it once. I didn't read it twice, but it strongly suggests that she was fired. So I just, I think that of given the brouhaha about this, I think it's fairly extraordinary timing.
Well, if I'm Trump, do you want Comey's kid working in your DOJ?
Right, but okay, but if I'm Trump, maybe next week would be better than this week.
Maybe he did.
I
Maybe
mean,
he didn't know. And he doesn't do everything, right? So it could be explained. I agree with you. It's bad timing. Okay. Look, releasing that videotape that we with Epstein that we know has pieces missing. Uh,
yeah,
good. We know that Republicans voting against the disclosure rule from Ro Khanna and Massey looks bad. These things look bad, but Trump often does things that look really bad. He stood on a stage in Helsinki next to Vladimir Putin and said he believed him over our own intelligence services. I mean, he does things that are a horrible look and gets away with it. The question is this one too much for man?
right.
I don't know the answer to that yet.
I don't know the answer, and I don't know if Pam Bondi survives it. I mean, we'll see. I mean, Trump is showing. I mean, actually, Trump is showing. I will say this: uncharacteristic loyalty, actually, to the people around him in this instance.
It's not bad enough for him yet. If it becomes
Right.
for her, she's got a problem. If she were to say something, like I thought Hegseth was done when it came out that there had been a little bit of trash talking about Trump. That's the line for him. If it's bad for him because of you, you've got a problem. And if you're bad about him, you're dead man walking.
Yeah.
Short of that, if he does not value the Epstein situation, I'm telling you, he doesn't. You can say he's wrong and that he has it wrong, but he does not think this is a big deal. He doesn't. I know that as a matter of fact.
That's fascinating.
He doesn't think there's anything there. He thinks the guy was a scumbag, and that's why he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. And he doesn't have any exposure on it, and he doesn't.
I see what. Yeah. Okay. You mean he doesn't think there's anything? There's no there to the story, but he presumably does understand the political nightmare of his base's feelings about this.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that is he reading it right? I don't know, because there are different things that are true at the same time. If I'm in Trump world, this is a way better thing to have Chris Cuomo and Vicky Ward talking about the fact that there's no deal with China yet, that
Yeah.
prices, the economy is starting to get a little wonky. on the price side because of tariffs, and that, hey, what happened to a ceasefire with Israel? And hey, by the way, Putin's beating the shit out of Ukraine right now.
Mm.
Epstein's kind of a better place to be for all the brouhaha with the pod bros and Megyn Kelly saying, wait until I get my hand. You'd rather have Megyn Kelly and Laura Loomer as, the fulcrum of your despair than, you know, justifying why China. I thought you had a deal with China. How come there is no deal? I thought you had a deal with the UK and the EU. How come there is no deal? What happened? What those are hard.
You make a very good point, actually. That actually, yeah, in a weird way, it's media manipulation, mainstream media manipulation. By I mean that's actually I hadn't really thought about that till now, Chris. But actually, it's very clever. I mean, yes, just let them be distracted too.
Yeah.
And it's not just the mega base who's distracted at this point. Everybody's talking about this.
Yeah, the main mistake here's a mistake, and I was here for it, and I was part of it. And the mistake is, or was, the day that the media decided to use social media as a proxy for Vox Populi, instead of doing the work that you and I had to do for years of trying to figure
Yeah,
out what was resonating in the country and with who and how and why and how to look at it, now you just take the number of tweets. And I
yeah.
remember the day that it happened. Oh, Vicky, people are kind of upset about your piece. What people? Oh, these 300 people that are part of this Twitter thread about it, and they don't think you got your piece right. 300 people. Who are they? How many of them are even real? What do other journalists say? Well, they're just echoing what these other people are saying. But who are these people? The day that happened was a bad day uh,
Mm.
for us and for journalism and for public discourse, because now the many are held hostage by the few. If we get 1,500 people, 1,500, if 1,500 people tweeted about our Substack, okay,
Hmm.
and said, "Oh, Vicky Ward said this crazy fucking thing on this," we would be trending. You would get calls from like someone
Yeah.
Rolling Stone and from TMZ, and it would be a nothing burger. And that's why the cycles are so fast. They're so intense and so fast now because they're always just a finger scratch deep. There's no there to reporting anymore. Things are just in and out, true and gone, false and gone. That's the problem. So that these pod guys, they're talking about it right now because people are clicking on it right now. And the rest of the media goes along for the ride because we're desperately trying to monetize digital media. Everybody's trying to figure out how to do it. And that's why we'll talk about things like this, because they work. And if it doesn't work,
Mm.
talk about it. So these other issues, you got to wait for them to be relevant again because Trump said,
It's
and
really interesting. As you were talking, Chris, I'm sitting here feeling quite smug about the thing you mentioned at the beginning that, we do. So we do, James Patterson and I have this book out called The Idaho 4 this week. It is selling really well, but I'm sitting here thinking, wow, that was 2 years of real, real in the trenches, being in Moscow, Idaho, being best friends with the police chief. I mean, the work that you and I have grown up on. And I'm thinking, I will say this, I'm really glad there is still a market for that hasn't gone away. The day that goes away, then we have a real problem.
well, true crime is a sweet spot. True crime checks boxes of style and substance, of noise, of light and heat, let's say.
Yeah.
It checks both. So you're in a sweet spot, especially when you're teaming up with Patterson, by the way, who's like, second only to like the Bible in terms of selling books.
Yeah.
But
Thank you for saying
so like
that. Yeah.
that's good for you. Well done in that strategic partnership. And he's a great guy. I've enjoyed interviewing him and listening to him and obviously reading him over the years. But um, that's a pretty narrow one, and even that covering Koberger, we had to wade through all this bullshit from these true crime TikTok people that were just
Oh my God. Well, that's
right?
a part.
And there's no
That's a part
accountability.
of the book,
Yeah, and if
right?
I get it. I actually heard that from James. And I'm very glad you guys did that, because if I did that, see, this is what pisses me off about the fake news thing. I have no problem being called out about saying things that are too far or exaggerated or wrong. And if they're wrong, I probably had to correct it myself, because there is accountability. There is accountability at a media organization, because you're going to get sued. And you are
Yeah.
not suing a TikToker because she has no money. So it's not worth it to you. And they just make shit up. So you'll get like a Megan Kelly.
Yeah. So the book actually, one of the book gets into all of that. You really see, kind of from the eyes of the people who are being trolled, what a nightmare it becomes, and also what a nightmare actually for the police, because they then have to waste time clearing people who had nothing to do with the murders, instead of getting on and doing what they want to be doing, which is finding the suspect. Chris, you've frozen.
My back?
You're back. Now you're unfrozen.
Thank you. I look the same, frozen or unfrozen. But yes, you're right. There is a lot of hardship that goes along with hype that usually gets ignored. But I also think that, there is a larger truth here. I mean, often to me, the battle in journalism, the professional battle, isn't what's true. It's what matters, why, and how.
Great.
It's what I struggle with more. Um,
I
yeah,
remember you saying that to me, by the way, one time at CNN. We were about to do a hit about something, and I had all these and it was something complicated. It was something to do with the Lev Parnas, the whole shadow campaign in Ukraine or whatever. And I was like sitting there and getting hair and makeup before, thinking, how am I going to explain this? And you said exactly that. What matters? What did you just say? What matters? Why? And how? Whatever it was. Yeah.
all the context. And look, that is at one time the blessing and the curse, right? Because people take shit out of context. That's what all that social media is about, is taking shit out of context. I mean, and again, it's because there's no accountability. If you get taken out of context, um, it used to be just that a headline would do that. I got this stat the other day that just really bothered the shit out of me. So 60% of people who see the headline don't click on the piece and then believe they have understanding from the headline.
Right.
Of people who click on the headline, so they click on the actual story, 50% read half of the piece. So why does this drive me crazy? Because the headline is almost always an exaggeration and a
Right.
very aspect of the piece. And the balancing information is always at least halfway down the piece. It's almost always at the end of a piece
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
when reached for content or a comment. A representative for Ms. Ward said, this never happened. She wasn't even in the country at the time, and proof will be forthcoming. That is so deep down. And that has always bothered me. But now it's like that used to bother me dealing with the New York Times, and where we put things in a 2-minute piece on World News Tonight, and whether or not the flavor of it was right and that alchemy of fairness. And that's just gone now. I can't tell you how many people believe that, like, you know, that I have certain positions because of things that they saw online that somebody took and twisted out of context and just made up. But now it's truth. So for me, it's not about, well, I'm just about the truth. The truth is very subjective in most things that are not arithmetic. You know what I mean? Like, I mean,
Yeah. 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 So how
even
does
science
that?
changes,
So I'm curious, because you're a video, TV. How does that translate into, doing something like this, or doing I mean, does it mean that everyone, or or is it different because you never know when, if you're doing a show, when in the hour they're tuning in?
So you don't know, right? I mean, ratings on TV, for instance, cable TV, it's very, to use a legal word, fugacious. They flow in and they flow back out. Every show looks like a sign, and it dips out at the commercial, and there are different levels of peaks on the rejoin and the interest level of that particular segment. So they're sampling, as we call it now. They're in and out, in and out, in and out. Podcasts are, so to me, exhaustingly long. Why? Because I have a tendency to leave them on passively, and you can put more ads in, and they'll put it on when they go to the gym, and they'll kind of half listen for 45 minutes of cardio. And the longer they listen or watch, the more ad placement, the more money. And so it's a different vibe than cable TV or linear TV. Surely, cable TV is different than linear TV. How? Linear TV is a broader audience. Cable TV is a politicized audience. People who are seeking controversy, takes, and that has motivated the podcast. Podcasts are all about hot takes. Nobody
Yeah.
breaks news on podcasts. Nobody breaks stories. They embellish and have takes on stories. Megyn Kelly is doing very well. She never reports. She is just, she may say, Trump told me, this person told me. What she does is get pissed off about something and attack somebody. That's the currency. So the question becomes is, well, what are you selling? And for me, the sell is reasonableness and being against the two-party system. My deal with News Nation was, I'm not a partisan, but I do hate them. And I want to bash the Democratic Party and I want to bash the Republican Party because they are part of a system that is killing our democracy. And I didn't say that at CNN because I didn't feel it as deeply. And I was part of policing the system. I don't want to police this. I want to say that the system is killing us. And of course, the Democrats are going after the Epstein stuff now. Of course they are, because it's bad for Trump. They didn't give a fuck during the Biden administration when they had the same material. Why? Because they don't give a shit about Epstein.
Right.
If it's not a point of advantage against the other side, neither side cares.
Mhm.
That's why you don't apologize. You don't apologize. Vicky is going to beat me over the head with my apology because now it's going to be better for Vicky. Don't listen to Cuomo, that apologizing piece of shit. Listen to me. And that's the problem with the binary system. And I want to destroy the binary system. That's why I like what Andrew Yang was doing. I like what Elon and Andrew Yang may do now. I like more parties. I like ranked choice voting. I like getting the political parties out of our primary process. They never deserve to have in there. They're just tradition. They're not in the law. They're not part of the founding documents. But so they allow me to do that. So I'm selling reasonableness. I have lawmakers on together. I have different perspectives on things and I test them, but I don't test them the way I used to. I don't have to prove that you're wrong. It doesn't get me anywhere. It
Right.
doesn't move the needle. If you're a Trump supporter, okay, I could disprove everything that you say. And it doesn't make a bit of fucking difference. It doesn't change one MAGA mind. And the left is never satisfied. And if I smile during one thing that you say as a MAGA supporter, I've been red pilled. So
Yeah.
there is no percentage in truthiness. And people don't even fucking want it. They say they want it, they don't mean it. And that's why they love true crime. The ride, baby. By definition, you've got two different versions of a narrative built in. And
Right.
pro storytellers on both sides who are trained to make something compelling. And that is an amazing journalistic experience. There's nothing like a criminal trial. It checks every box: relatability, stakes, consequences, law and justice. Right? There's almost always passion. There's almost always that cherchez la femme. You're always looking for a woman.
Yeah.
Well, so you've picked a great spot of investigative relevancy, and I've seen you use your tools on a lot of different levels. So I know you can report on anything, but if I were going to pick something to do in this day and age, it's true crime all day long. But like this Epstein thing, where does it go from here? Oh, I
Yeah.
know they're not going to let it go. They're too sensitive to MAGA, and MAGA is too sensitive to this. Bondi's going to come out and say something. They tried to do that fentanyl thing the other day.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Bondi's going to come forward and say, look, when I said the list is on my desk, what I should have said, I misspoke. Okay. I should have said the matter is before me. I am actively dealing with this. I meant on my desk as a metaphor, not that I had an envelope with papers.
Right.
I did, I would have released it. Nobody's keeping me from releasing anything except these two judges. And we do have to be sensitive. There is more that we can get out. I am going to petition and do it. Bongino, Cash Patel, I don't know. I think that they just eat it and they move on and just
Right.
hope that people forget. And when they go back
But
into
do you think though to what you said earlier that they could go to those two judges that they could
yeah,
you think I mean do you think there's a chance Pam Bondi would do that?
yes. Now, do I think she should? Yeah. Uh, do I think that this unholy marriage right now between the right and left fringe, who are both obsessing on Epstein for very different reasons, um, will that marriage break up over this? Yes, because once you get to, well, if you're going to expose the people who got accused, you better expose the accusers.
Right.
Well, we want to protect them. They were minors at the time, but they're not minors now. None of them. None is a minor now. So if you're saying that you had to be careful about the people who were accused because there was no prosecution that came from it, well, then why the fuck would you protect the accuser? If they did not muster, if they did not warrant a criminal investigation, let alone a prosecution, what are you protecting them for?
Right.
That's a cancel culture standard being applied to a legal framework. There is no
Right.
cancel culture in the law. You only get protection if there's a proffer, if there's a show of proof, if there's an established reason for it. If you're telling me that there's no prosecution, like I had to deal with this with my brother's shit. Oh, you got 11 or 200 or whatever it is, the number of allegations. Yeah, but they were looked at and there wasn't a single investigation that went forward, let alone a charge. So what's the value of an allegation? Well, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. Well, it doesn't mean it did happen either because nobody even wants to take up the case. They don't even want to pick up when all they need is probable cause to arrest. All they need is probable cause. It's not even 50-50. Probable cause is lower than 50-50.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, why am I defending these people? Because there's a crowdsourced consequence structure of culture that we are conflating with justice. That was the problem for Me Too. I am an advocate for Me Too. I am an ally of Me Too. I don't give a shit what happened with my brother. I believe that, I know firsthand that the Vicky Wards of the world had to put up with shit for fucking decades that wouldn't be allowed for 5 minutes today.
That is definitely true, Chris.
Right. And, so yeah, I absolutely think it was needed. What pisses me off about Me Too was it was just about chasing bold-faced names. And we never even went back and saw who changed.
Well, and it was and I think the other problem is, I talk about this quite a lot with Adam Klasfeld when we do our Substacks, that the feeling of being indiscriminate because, lumping everybody, not everyone rose to the level of Harvey Weinstein, but it felt like they did.
I
And
For a minute it did when Ronan Farrow was having his run and all that stuff. And look, I I celebrated Ronan Farrow. I didn't like the piece he did about my brother, but that's subjective. That's up to me. I get why he did it, and it wasn't a complicated piece to do. But I think that the problem for me with it is: did Fox News change? Is NBC different after Matt Lauer? Is CNN different? Is ABC? Is anybody different? Did the system change? Can a woman now find an ally without having to go to HR directly? because that's a fucking high bar to get somebody to have to do, to basically want to go to the cops within a company. What changed? What changed culturally? We don't even report on it. We don't even go back. Why? Because it's not what it was about. It wasn't about real change. It was about making money off of the specter of accountability. And fine, that's culture, that's media. It's not justice, and it's not the justice system. And now we conflate the. So with Epstein, it's a perfect.
Well, although I think that, to your point, male bosses don't speak to women employees in the way that my male bosses spoke to me 20 years ago. So that's change.
That is true, but also I don't think they hire women the way they used to. I think that men and women are worried about hiring young women.
And
And
maybe that I'd be fascinated to. You may very well be right, Chris, in which case that's
I,
not a good thing.
I hear it all the time, and I have to tell you, this Trumpy shit with the DEI, I got to tell you, I saw it coming. I saw the reaction formation coming. I'm not surprised by it. I wasn't surprised by the case with the Asian students and affirmative action, especially with this court. But I also don't like it. I did think that there was a need for corrective actions, and I still do. Okay. And I get how the word equity has been weaponized and all that. But I'm telling you, Vicky, I hear it all the time from people who are so relieved to get rid of their DEI person, their DEI section, their DEI office, DEI,
Mm.
and they won't hire young women, and they won't hire pretty young things, whether they're boys or girls, and they won't allow corporate parties, and they don't want the bond. They don't want to know anybody. And you can't be in my office unless somebody's with you. I don't know that all of these changes were necessarily good versus just being protective of people.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like the culture wasn't supposed to be that people can never have human or personal or intimate exchanges ever again. I mean, how many American families would you have if nobody ever fucked anybody where they work? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
how much smaller would our population be? People work so much. Who are you going to wind
Yeah.
up with if not somebody who's part of what you work for? When do you have time to see
Yeah.
anybody? So I think there's overcorrection like everything else in American culture. I'm just saying that we never even went back and did the work of who changed and how and
Yeah.
why, and what you're saying. Men in the workplace who are in chief positions, they don't do. Now in the media, it gets even more tricky. Why? Because even though it was a low hanging fruit target for Me Too, as industries go, because everybody in the media was, going
Yeah.
after you, there's a lot of female bosses in this business, probably disproportionately a lot. Okay. Like most of my team is female. Most of every team I've ever had is female. Most of the bosses I've worked with have been female. So like my EP right now is female. My staff is mostly women, and they act differently towards younger women. They think differently. They don't want to deal with certain things. They sometimes have to struggle with being fair by, well, you got to give the kid a chance. You know what I mean? Before you may have given her a chance or him a chance because of how they looked. Now you got to be careful, and you don't want to hire her because she's attractive or him because he's attractive, and you're worried about what he's going to say or not say. Now you got to police yourself on that level also, that you can't be biased against people because they're young and single. Um, it's tricky, and people protect themselves. And what we did was we created a culture of protection versus what we were really looking to do, which was to make things more fair and more free and better for everybody. I don't think that's happened. Um,
Mm.
that's happened at all. And you know, and I see it all the time. We just don't talk about it the same way. Why? Because we moved on. Nobody talks about that shit anymore. They're on to the next thing now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It kind of died with Trump. After like the 900th woman who said something about him that would have killed anybody else,
Yeah.
it's like our culture made a choice. And it's like, you know what? Care more about me. Care more about me. Care more about national security. Care more about the fact that I can't afford to dream anymore. that there are more billionaires being made than people who can afford a second car. Fuck you and your sex life. I really don't give a shit about it. I care about me. And I don't want to hear about Trump, who he fucks and who he doesn't fuck, because who I want him to fuck is you. I want him to fuck you over for what you've done to me with this system. That's what I want. And he's going to do that. And everything else, I think you all do it, or I about it anyway. So I'm not going to pay attention. And that's where we are now. Trump was right. He could pull out a weapon and shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, and unless it's someone who's asking him for a disclosure about Epstein, I, I, I
Oh my God, Chris. Yeah, well, listen, you paint. Unfortunately, it feels, it feels like you're right, but it's a bleak world out there on every level.
it is and it isn't. Look, here's a mistake that I'm making. Okay. And we like to call it the bubble. I've always laughed at that. I mean, you know my business well enough. I mean, I travel all the time, all over the world. I talk to people all over the place in all these different capacities on both sides all the time. I mean, you know where I live. I live in a place that's very different on the off season than in the season. In season, I could talk to the
Yeah.
most people in the world. Off season, I'm a volunteer firefighter and a Coast Guard captain. It's like I get a pretty good mix of people in my life. And the mistake I've made is playing to the few, playing to the podcast guys, playing to the insider media and the cognoscenti and what they care about. And that's because the media is such a pack animal you know and I don't want to go bad on the media. I think the media is a signature blessing of our democracy. There's so many like people like you. There's Matt Taibbi, Matt Schellenberger. There's so many people out there doing fucking phenomenal work. There's so many outlets doing phenomenal work, like the Free Press and Mo News and all these other
Yeah.
places. There's great shit out there, and there's bad shit too. So it's like, well, what do you want to focus on? Well, we've made our decision. We focus on the bad shit 24/7, 365. I want insults. I don't want insights. I want negativity as a proxy for insight. I do not want to hear why you like Chris Cuomo, Vicky, and why you profiled him. I want to hear you take him fucking down or you gave him a pass and you're soft. And that's a problem. But here's the good news. Here's the good news. You are not like that in your friendships. You are not like that with your boys. You are not like that in any other corporate environment. You do not exist on any team in any business by
Mm.
talking your colleagues. It is not acceptable anywhere else except in the media and in our politics. That's the good news, is that the majority of this country shares so much more as common concern and feelings about where we should be than what we see portrayed in our politics, because that's binary and most
Right.
that way. And every time we do sample polling, I'm not a huge fan of polling and determinative of outcome, but as a preference structure in a moment, I think it can be helpful. You ask people about immigration, over half the country. Should you enforce the laws? Yes. Does everybody who entered illegally get deported? No. Is everyone who entered illegally seen the same? No. Should there be amnesty for everybody? No. Which party says that? Neither. Neither. Why? Because there's no advantage in it. But that's where
Right.
people are.
Right.
That's where people are. Same thing, you look at ICE, the majority's right in the right place, right where it should be. Right where it should be. Epstein, the majority's right where it should be. Doesn't give a
Right.
shit. Doesn't give a shit. If there's a
Yeah.
client, put it out. If there's not a client list, why am I talking about this when I'm worried about Russia and Ukraine? Um, the majority's there, but we don't play to the majority. We play to magnified minorities.
It's fascinating. So the problem is the framework.
The problem is the profit motive.
Yeah.
It's paid. It's what gets you paid. If I did a show tonight, so I've been working on this open for tonight for like 10 hours. If I were to come out of the box tonight and say, there's a lot of good shit happening in America. I want to introduce you to this guy who's done this. And I got my friend Vicky Ward on tonight. She and Patterson doing this book. It's really fucking cool. And it's a really good look at how they wound up making this case and Koberger and all the obstacles to it. And a good look at our justice system. And it's the right outcome because he took the deal. Nobody's going to watch. I mean, I'll do
Yeah.
a segment on you and James. They will watch that because you guys have some really good tea in that book about the process. But people don't want to hear what's working in America.
Mm.
They don't want to hear about the kid who was found, who was missing, and like 90% of all kidnappings was taken by one of the parents in a custody dispute. Uh, they don't want to hear about it. They don't want to hear about the small business that's figured out a way around tariffs. They don't give a shit. They won't watch. They're watching for confirmation biases
Yeah.
already feel. So if I want to be successful, I got to find a through line, and it's not easy. That's why I came to Substack so that I could give people a flavor of the authenticity of the process. And that's why I appreciate you for joining me today and taking an hour of time that you'll never get back.
Chris, it's such a pleasure to catch up with you. It really is. Well, I'll be watching your opening tonight. After now that I know you've worked on it for 10 hours.
And I know absolutely, it's so funny. Everything I say that I know is the right thing to say does not resonate. And everything that I say or every case that I make that is kind of just instructive of a dynamic that's ongoing, that's when things get hundreds of thousands or even millions of views.
Yeah.
But when I look at a balanced approach to what's going on and where we need that, if it's not good for one side over the other, I'm lucky if I get 50,000 views. Look, that's what it is. And I only control what I can and I keep doing it. One thing I control, when you and Jimmy are ready to do something about the book, let me know. I'd love to have you on.
We would love that. Really
Right.
love that. Yeah.
Vicky, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for your insight. I hope people follow your work very closely here because you're a rare bird.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Well, see you soon, hopefully talking about the book. And thank you for this. And I'm going to watch you tonight.
All right. Vic, take care. You know how to get me. Everybody,
I do.
very much. Appreciate you. Enjoy yourselves. I'll see you tonight, News Nation, 8 p, 11 p Eastern.